that conversation.
Okay.
Okay? So everyone, let me introduce Claudia Kalmikov. And she is very close to Ratio Christi because she's on the board of directors. And Daniel was actually with me at the Denton Bible Biola conference. I don't think Daniel went to your breakout, but I did. You went to a different one. We kind of split that up.
Okay.
But he was there, and Claudia was there as well. That's where we met. Now, Claudia is, of course, a Christian apologist. She's a national speaker and a blogger. Her website, straighttalkwithclaudiak.com, is something that we're all going to want to check out and stay close to. She's got a Master's of Arts degree in Christian Apologetics from Biola University. That's the same university I got my apologetic certification from. She's on the speaking team for Biola. She does national conferences, teaches at her church. She's very active, and we are so privileged to have Claudia with us tonight at the University of North Texas, speaking on the topic of relativism. So Claudia, let me open us with a prayer, and then I'll give it over to you, okay?
Okay.
All right. Heavenly Father, we thank you for bringing us together tonight on this important topic. We all have friends and family. Lord, you know that we are to be called salt and light in their lives, and they are sometimes confused. They sometimes don't think truth is available to them, and they don't think, Lord, that your truth is the truth. And we're really anxious and glad that you've brought Claudia with us tonight. Bless her speech, bless her time with us, Lord. Help us to absorb her knowledge and her wisdom and experience so we can be that salt and light that you call us to be, Lord. We ask all of this in Jesus' strong name. Amen.
Amen.
Claudia, over to you.
Thank you so much. Well, before I get started, I want to tell everyone a little bit about me. So I'm a mom. I've been married for 36 years. I have two adult sons. One is 27, the other is 30. And I was a stay-at-home mom for years, and I went to Bible study. I was pretty faithful about that. And I went to one called BSF, Bible Study Fellowship. Any BSFers out there? Okay. So BSF is a pretty intense Bible study, and I did this for 8 years. And while I was there, I was getting some questions answered, but the more I learned, the more questions I had. And I realized, as intense and deep as this study was, it wasn't deep enough. I knew I wanted a formal theological education. So I enrolled at Biola University in the apologetics department, and my husband actually did it with me. So we went together. We live local. We're about 45 minutes from Biola. So we went to class a couple of days a week, and he was my carpool buddy. And we did it over 3 years. And I started it kind of late in life. I started it in 2014. And it was really hard because we had been out of college for 30 years, and I had no clue how to write a paper anymore after 30 years. And so I knew that's all we were going to be doing, was writing papers. So sure enough, we took a writing class, and that helped a lot. But I got to tell you, I didn't know what God was going to do with this. I have a good friend who said to me when we started going back to school, "Why are you doing this? What are you going to do with it?" And I said, "I don't know. I just know that God wanted me to do this because he made himself very clear to me over the period of time that I was thinking about it. He was shouting it to me. And I don't have time to tell you how the different ways he was doing that, but he was. So I knew he wanted me to do this. I didn't know how he was going to use it, but now I do. Now I see what he's done, because now Craig Hazen, the head of our department, has dragged me all over the country speaking at different conferences, and I've been teaching at our church and teaching locally. So God's definitely used the education he gave me, and I'm grateful. I'm grateful to be used by him. So that's a little bit about me, but this talk can be a little long, so I want to get going on it. And I want to tell you that I'm really glad you are here to listen, because I think this is an important topic, the topic of truth and relativism. I think it's important because we're at war. And we are at war for everything that is good and true in the world these days. And I don't want you to be casualties of this war, either as adults or students. This is the kind of war where the conflict takes place in the spiritual realm, but the casualties occur here in the physical realm. And I know some of you students just get hammered by some of the people who are who adhere to other religions or no religion at all. And I know it's really difficult. So the Bible teaches that spiritual warfare is a truth encounter. In fact, 2 Corinthians tells us that we don't fight with the weapons of this world, but that our weapons have divine power to demolish strongholds. And we demolish arguments that set themselves up against the knowledge of God. That's what we do as apologists. And we take every thought captive to make it obedient to Christ. So we're at war. And what I want to do is step up for those who are just getting beaten up by the world today and trying to hang on to what is good and true. So I want to teach Christians how to fight back in a good way. And that's why I do this talk. Tonight, we're going to talk about truth. So first of all, what is truth and why is it important? Why should we care about it? What I want to do is define truth and relativism for you. I want to discuss the consequences of relativism and tell you why it doesn't work, and give you some ways you can respond to it in ways that will hopefully help you impact the culture around you, maybe even on campus. So there's an author named Francis Beckwith, and he was teaching an ethics class at the University of Las Vegas. And this is kind of funny because at the end of the semester, not at the beginning, not in the middle, but at the end of the semester, this student came up to him and he said, "Professor, why is truth important?" And Beckwith said, "Well, do you want the true answer or the false answer?" So, he's trying to put things into perspective for this young man. So one of the things we hear about on the news all the time is fake news. People go crazy about fake news. And I think that's because we live in a world where we know what objective truth is, and we expect it. And if you think about this, we expect truth from every area of our lives, our doctors, lawyers, bankers, teachers, coaches, especially our loved ones, because they're giving us information and we're making decisions based on what they're telling us. So they better be telling us the truth. So we live in a world where objective truth is known and it's expected by everyone. Paul in 2 Thessalonians says, "There will be those who will perish because they did not receive the love of the truth so as to be saved." And then he goes on to say that there will be those who will be judged because they did not believe the truth, but they took pleasure in wickedness. So what's he saying here? He's saying that the people had a choice and they chose not to believe the love, not to receive the love of the truth. So how about you? Do you love the truth? Is your heart breaking for a generation that has bought a lie? Well, mine certainly is. Well, moral relativism says there is no objective truth. I don't know why my slide is doing that, but it says there is no objective truth. It says your truth is your truth. My truth is mine. There is no such thing as right or wrong, good or bad. Everything's a gray area. Everything's permitted. Anything goes. And relativism is a worldview. And it's a worldview that all other worldviews are true. Now, I know I just used the word in the definition. I'm going to explain to you what I'm talking about. A worldview is how you see God, the world, and your place in it. Okay. And a worldview, relativism says that all worldviews are true. It says everybody's right. Don't tell anybody they're wrong. It's wrong to tell someone they're wrong. So I think you get where I'm going with this. Your truth is your truth, my truth is mine, kind of thing. But here's what I want you all to know. If you don't get anything else out of this talk tonight, I want you to understand one thing, and that is that relativism is false and objective truth exists. And we will see this when we talk about the consequences of relativism. We're going to see that we really don't live in a world that supports relativism. But before I get into that, I want to talk to you about truth a little bit. So one of the definitions of truth is the correspondence theory of truth, which says that truth is when your beliefs match up to reality. Makes sense, right? If I were to say I'm a 6 foot tall, 300-pound sumo wrestler, you guys would look at me and say, you're crazy. What are you talking about? Well, this is how the correspondence theory of truth works. A claim is made and you check to see if it's true. We do this every day. We don't even know we're doing it. Okay. So, but here's the catch. When the topic shifts to religion or morality, there's some kind of switch that gets flipped in our minds, and we will change what is meant by truth. And I'm going to give you an illustration to bring this idea home. So this is my favorite flavor of ice cream. Do you guys have Baskin Robbins out there?
Yes.
You do? Okay, so in the summertime here in California, Baskin Robbins has a flavor called baseball nut ice cream, and it's my favorite. It's sweet cream ice cream with raspberry and cashews in it. It's delicious. So that's my favorite flavor of ice cream. So this is kind of going to be an interactive part of my talk, if you're willing to humor me here. So if I were to say that baseball nut ice cream is the best ice cream, who would agree? Raise your hand. Who would agree? Okay. Now, who disagrees? Raise your hand. Nobody? Come on. It's either your favorite or it's not. Okay. So basically what we have here is a truth that can be true for some and false for others, which is kind of an odd predicament, right? But you see, that's okay, because what we're talking about here is subjective truth. Subjective truths are about you. You're the subject. Subjective truths are personal, private, or you could say they're just your opinion, and they can change at any time. It's about you, the subject. It's not about the ice cream. It's about you and what you think about it. Okay. So subjective truths are your opinion. Now, what if I were to say baseball nut ice cream controls diabetes? Can that claim be true for some and false for others? Obviously not, because now I'm making a claim about how the world works. Now I'm saying, now I'm making an objective claim. And even though that's a false claim, it'd be great if ice cream would treat diabetes. I'd be all in. But we know that insulin is the only thing that works for diabetes. Okay. So objective truths can be true or false, but objective truths make a claim that applies to all people at all times in all places. And it tells you, it's external. It tells you something about how the world works. Okay. So are you guys following me now on this subjective and subjective truth thing? Are you with me? Yeah. Okay. So what I want to do is I'm going to make some claims, and I want you guys to tell me if you think they're objective or subjective. And if you think they're subjective, I want to hear you say ice cream. If you think they're objective, I want to hear you say insulin. Okay. All right. So let's say I make the claim that Tahiti is the best vacation spot. Is that ice cream or insulin?
Ice cream.
Obviously that's my opinion, right? How about red is the best color? Ice cream or insulin?
Ice cream.
Right. Ice cream. How about Diet Coke has fewer calories than regular Coke? Yeah, that's a fact. We know that's true, right? That's also a scientific claim, and scientific claims pertain to objective truth. How about the Rams just won the Super Bowl this year, shockingly, but they did. Is that ice cream or insulin? Right. That's the fact. We saw that happen. That's also a historical claim, isn't it? And historical claims pertain to objective truth. How about this one? Abortion is wrong. Ice cream or insulin?
Insulin. Insulin, we'd say. Yeah, we say.
Danny and Rebecca? Hate to put you on the spot. Okay. So you guys,
Well,
you guys
I
were
will
quiet.
say- I will
You were
say
quiet on that
insulin- I will say insulin, but
Okay.
I will not say insulin, in my opinion.
Okay.
It isn't.
So what that claim is not a scientific or historical claim, is it? That's a moral ethical claim. And I noticed that when I kind of went from the scientific and historical, maybe there was some confusion as to how to categorize that one. I get it. But the question here is, if all moral ethical claims, are they all objective, like objective claims are transcendent to the world outside of us? Or are all moral claims like ice cream? That's the question. You know, culture's greatest influence is in what it presents as being normal. Wouldn't you say that's true? But not all that seems normal should be normal. And sometimes what goes uninspected, or how would you say, what goes unexamined, sometimes goes unchallenged. And so Sean McDowell, I don't know if you all know who Sean McDowell is, but he's a well-known apologist. He's an author, speaker. He's a professor at Biola University. He's a brilliant guy. And he was going to a party with his wife one night. And Stephanie knows that Sean likes to get into these theological discussions with people. So before the party, Stephanie says, okay, Sean, can we just go and have a good time and go like normal people? Could you please just not get into it with these people? And Sean said, sure, okay, fine. So they go to this party, and sure enough, Sean gets involved in a discussion with this guy about abortion. And the guy says to Sean, well, if you don't like abortion, then don't have one. And Sean says, well, he says, sorry to bring up the obvious, but I can't. But he says, I have a question for you. He said, are you against slavery? And the guy said, well, of course. And Sean said, well, because, you know, if you don't like slavery, don't own one. Well, was the guy against slavery because that was his subjective opinion? He just didn't like it? Or because it was objectively wrong? Because we know that it is objectively wrong to enslave anybody. So the question here is that if there's no objective standard of morality, can we judge anybody for doing anything morally wrong? Can we think about it? If morality is like ice cream, then we can't judge anyone for their behavior any more than we could judge someone for their favorite flavor of ice cream. If morality is subjective, we can't judge terrorists for decapitating Christians and drowning them in cages because that's true for them. That's okay by them. And we can't judge college students for trashing a campus and destroying it and looting stores and setting cars on fire because they don't like the outcome of an election or they don't want to hear a conservative speaker on their campus. If morality is subjective, who are we to judge? Well, the mood of our culture today is that morality is subjective. You can have your truth and I can have mine. But when a young person or anyone says this to me, I don't believe them because we don't really live like that. I think people just kind of decide in their own minds which truths they want to be objective or subjective, but we don't really live like this. Part of being human is knowing what is right and what is wrong. And if you try to jump off a building thinking you can fly, gravity is going to have something to say about it, right? And now you can say you don't believe in gravity, but stubbornness doesn't change truthfulness. If you try to jump off that building, you're still going to die because gravity exists whether you like it or not. Now, just as the laws of gravity exist in the objective world outside us, we have transcendent moral laws that exist as well, that we all live by and we all know it. Even the Declaration of Independence says we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. Self-evident means you just know it. So if you want to know what somebody really believes about the objective status of morality, it's not in what they say or what they do. It's how they want to be treated. If somebody, everybody wants to be treated as though morality is an objective feature of the universe. It's inescapable. If somebody says there's no such thing as objective morality, cut them off on the highway. Cut in front of them in line at the bookstore, the grocery store, and watch how they react. Morality is written on our hearts, and we know people's beliefs about morality, not by their actions, but by their reactions. So if somebody says morality is relative or subjective, I don't believe them. J.P. Moreland told a story about when he was teaching at the University of Vermont. He was teaching in the dorms one night, and he was teaching about objective morality. And when he was finished, this young man came up to him and he said, you know what? He goes, I got to tell you, I just don't agree with you. He says, I don't think there's an objective standard that applies to all of us. I think you have your truth. I have mine. We shouldn't judge each other or push our views on each other. And JP reaches out his hand to shake the young man's hand. And he says, you know what? That's fine. Thanks for having me. And he shakes his hand and he starts to walk out the door. Well, as he's walking out the door, there happens to be a table near the door that has a boombox sitting on it. And this boombox belonged to this young man. And I don't know if JP knew it or not, but as he walked out the door, he grabs this boombox and takes it with him and takes off down the hall. And he doesn't come back. And this young man runs after him and he says, hey, what are you doing? That's my boombox. You can't take that. And JP said, wait a second. Didn't you just say that you don't think there's an objective moral standard that applies to everyone? You have your truth, I have mine. And the kid says, yeah. And JP says, well, see, I like to work out in the gym. And he says, when I work out, I like to listen to music. So I think it's okay to take your stereo, and that's my truth. So that kid didn't know what to say. He was in a philosophical bind. An unfortunate circumstance. There are consequences to relativism. And one of the consequences is that relativism, here we go. Ideas have consequences. Yeah, I missed that one. There we go. So one of the consequences to relativism is that relativists can't accuse someone of doing something wrong. Well, why is that? Well, relativism denies things as right and wrong. Remember in the beginning, I said there's no such thing as right or wrong, good or bad. Everything's a gray area. Anything goes. Well, if you believe that morality is about personal definition, then you can't make moral judgments about another's behavior, no matter how offensive it is to you, because relativism legitimizes every personal choice, even the ones that are the most offensive to us. So that doesn't work. The other problem is relativists can't complain about the problem of evil. What's the biggest objection we hear about the existence of God today? The problem of evil, right? People say if God was all good and all powerful, he would eliminate evil from the earth. And since he hasn't done that, he's either not all good or he's not all powerful. But what do you notice about this statement? They're admitting that evil exists. Well, how can evil exist in a world where there's no right or wrong or good or bad? Evil can't be real if morals are relative, because relativism denies that things are right and wrong. So if relativism were true, then the objection about God's existence based on the problem of evil would disappear. Now, the next consequence to relativism is that relativists can't place blame or accept praise, because relativism renders these terms as meaningless. It's meaningless. There's no external standard of measure defining what should be praised or condemned. There's no bar. The bar's been taken away. Okay, so without absolutes, nothing would be terrible, horrible, and worthy of condemnation. We wouldn't need jails. We wouldn't need the police if we really lived in a world like that. And neither could anything be really good and honorable and worthy of praise. There would be no awards. We'd have no CMAs or Oscars or Nobel Peace Prize. Your kids would never get any awards. So this is where relativists are always inconsistent, because they seek to avoid blame, but they readily accept praise. But if praise and blame are valid, then relativism has to be false. And the next consequence to relativism is that relativists can't charge others with unfairness or injustice. In a world devoid of moral absolutes, these two terms would make sense. How can justice and fairness exist in a world where there's no absolute standard to require them? There was a professor who was teaching an ethics class at a major university in Indiana. This is a true story. And he told his students, by the way, every story I'm telling you is a true story, just so you know. He told his students to write on any ethical topic of their choice. And he gave them all these requirements. He said you have to have a thesis, it has to be backed up with reasons and documentation, it has to be a certain length, it has to be turned in on time. He gave them all these requirements. So this young man, who happened to be an atheist, decided to write on the topic of moral relativism. And in his thesis, he argued that everything's a matter of opinion. He says, you like chocolate, I like vanilla, and so forth. And so he followed all the requirements. He had a thesis. It was backed up with reasons, documentation. It was the right length. He turned it in on time. He even turned it in this beautiful blue folder. So he turns in his paper, and a few days later, he gets it back, and there's a big F at the top of it. And this kid is ticked. He storms into the professor's office, and he says, hey, what is this? What do you mean F? You didn't grade my paper on its merits. And the professor raises his hand and quietly says, weren't you the student who wrote on the topic of moral relativism? He says, yeah, that was me. And he says, well, I don't like blue folders, so you get an F. So suddenly the light bulb went off in this kid's head, and he realized that he really did believe in objective morality. And this simple lesson defeated his entire lesson for relativism. So the moral to the story is that objective morality exists. And if you really want to get a relativist to admit it, all you have to do is treat them unfairly. You know, the moral law is not always the law by which we treat others, is it? It's not. But it's always the law by which we want to be treated, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, the next consequence to relativism is that relativists can't hold meaningful moral discussions. How can there be a discussion if morality doesn't exist? What are you going to talk about if you're going to have a talk about ethics? You can only have a meaningful dialogue about ethics if morality is seen as a universal standard. And this goes for word definitions too. I don't know if you guys are aware of this, but last year, Merriam-Webster expanded the definition of anti-vaxxer to include not just someone who doesn't want the COVID vaccine, but to now everyone who questions it or is opposed to a government-forced vaccination. Now, it is possible that a person could be against a vaccine mandate, okay, but not be against all vaccines. Maybe you still want to get the flu vaccine every year, but you just don't want the COVID vaccine. Well, sorry, 2 years ago, you weren't an anti-vaxxer, but now you are. And this isn't the first time Merriam-Webster has done this. They have also expanded their definition of racism to include systematic oppression. So now you're a racist, not only are you a racist, but now you're an oppressor too. Nathaniel Hawthorne said, words in a dictionary, how potent for good or evil they become in the hands of one who knows how to combine them or manipulate them, I like to say. I think those are wise words. Well, the rules of language have been set, and they must be set if we are going to communicate sanely. Words have to mean something with objective, predictable, and enduring definitions. Otherwise, you couldn't listen to a thing, you couldn't dispute anything or argue with anyone. Disagreements are based on the presupposition that the use of words is accurate and coherent. The very nature of speaking and reading and writing assumes definition and clarity. Normal daily communication would be impossible if our language wasn't set in stone. And if you depart from objective truth, you have no hope of seeing reality for what it truly is. And you are then ruled by the relativists and whatever they demand that day. And that really doesn't bode well for our freedom. So the next consequence is that relativists can't promote the obligation of tolerance. This is a big one. Tolerance is one of the key virtues of relativism. Relativists argue that morals are individual and that we should tolerate the views of others and not judge each other or push our views on each other, and there should be no moral rules. Well, this view is self-refuting. Anyone know why? Well, if there should be no moral rules, how can there be a rule requiring tolerance? You see, it doesn't live up to its own standard. It's self-refuting. Relativists violate their own rule of tolerance when they don't tolerate absolutists or non-relativists. They only tolerate those who agree with them, making them just as intolerant as any absolutist appears to be. If they don't like what you say, you're canceled. Where's the tolerance in that? Well, this next consequence, I think, is the most dangerous. And that is that relativism makes religion irrelevant. Francis Schaeffer was an apologist back in the 70s. He's been gone for years now. But he said that the culture sees objective and subjective truth like a two-story house. He said on the bottom floor, you have things that you know, facts. You have your business, law, math, chemistry, all the sciences. This is where we are Monday through Friday, work and school, bottom floor. This is the objective floor. He said the upper story is where we live. This is where you cook the foods that you want, you have your friends over that you want, you celebrate the holidays that you want, and you would never think of carrying your second story traditions or legislating those second story traditions on the first floor. Well, what our culture does is we take religion and morality and we put it on the second floor, because those two things are supposed to be personal preferences. And what happens when we do that is those things fade into the background of most of our lives. And that's why when I asked the abortion question earlier, ice cream or insulin, many people answer both ways. There's confusion there. Because that is a moral, ethical idea that's supposed to be subjective. So anyway, when we do that, it fades into the background and most of our lives. And research has actually found this to be true, because students have said when they're in trouble, they will bring God out. But he is otherwise disconnected from what they do on Monday through Friday. So basically what happens in church stays in church. They're not living out their faith during the week, okay? Well, this makes religion irrelevant. And it's easy for the culture to dismiss our views this way. But if you want to show it's illegitimate, you don't have to argue against it. Look what Christopher Reeve did. Some of you might remember Christopher Reeve played Superman in the early Superman movies, and he was a darn good Superman. Well, Christopher Reeve suffered a terrible horse riding accident, and he became a quadriplegic. And as a result, he became this huge proponent of embryonic stem cell research to help find cures for neurological disorders. So he goes in front of this medical student panel. Excuse me. He's at Yale University. He goes in front of a medical student panel and he says, when matters of public policy are debated, no religion should have a seat at the table. He said, I don't object to religion. I'm a Unitarian myself, but we're talking about the promise of science, the ethics of science, and not religion. Did you catch that? What did he just do? He just took religion and he blew it off and he put it on the second floor. He just made it completely irrelevant to the conversation. He said, no religion should have a seat at the table. I'm talking about the ethics of science, not religion. He just made it irrelevant to the conversation. Well, Jesus said, we have to be careful to build our house on a rock, not on shifting sand. What's our house? Our house is our future and eternity. Religion needs to be our foundation. It needs to be on the first story, not on the second. Because if your foundation isn't solid, your whole house is going to collapse. If you don't know Christ and you don't know his promises, when a tragedy comes, you're going to fall apart. Well, TV news journalist Britt Hume was talking about the Tiger Woods incident many years ago. Some of you might know Tiger Woods is a professional golfer, and he was involved in this scandal where he cheated on his wife, I think with more than one woman. And so Britt Hume is a Christian and he's a TV news journalist. And he was talking about this on national TV. And he said he thought that Tiger would recover as a golfer, but maybe not as a person. And then he said he thought it would depend on his faith. And then he went on to explain that Tiger is a Buddhist, and in Buddhism, they don't offer the forgiveness and redemption that Christianity does. So on national TV, he says, Tiger, turn to the Christian faith and you will be a great example to the world. Uh-oh, you don't do that on national TV. You don't somehow suggest that your subjective preference in religion is somehow better. That's like saying your favorite flavor of ice cream is the one true flavor. So in response to what Britt Hume said, TV critic Eric Degens said that suggesting your religion is true is no different than a terrorist. He equates Britt Hume's comment with terrorism. Why? Because Britt took religion off the second floor and he put it on the first floor where it belongs. He had the courage to do that. Let me say something about religion real quick. To expect religion to be kept on the second story is the same as saying all religions are subjective. They're all the same. It doesn't matter what you believe. We're all going to go to heaven anyway. They all believe basically the same thing. All roads lead to God and so forth. But that's relativistic and wrong thinking. Yes, religions are similar in some ways, like maybe in how one should live their life. But why is it that people don't talk about the differences between religions and they only talk about the similarities? Because the differences between religions are huge in the areas of the person of Jesus Christ. Who was he? Was he just some guy who walked the earth, some prophet maybe? Or was he the Messiah? Was he God? Their view of sin, their way of salvation, their view of God. And what happens to a person when they die? Here's an example. One religion might say that when you die, you go to heaven and become gods yourself. Another religion might say when you die, you reincarnate and you come back as somebody else in your next life. Another religion says when you die, you're just done. It's game over. There's nothing after that. Let's see. One religion says that when you die, you go to purgatory where you work off your bad sin and then you can go to heaven. Christianity says when you die, you either go to heaven or hell. There's nothing in between. So here's the question. When you die, can you be in all these places at once? No, you can't. You have one soul. Where are you going to be? You will be alive and more alive than you've ever been before, but you could only be in one place. All these religions cannot be the same because they all contradict each other. It is logically absurd. It's ridiculous to say these religions are the same, because they're not. They all contradict each other by the law of non-contradiction. They cannot all be the same. Now, I'm a Christian because, well, for two reasons. I'm a Christian, number one, because an event occurred. The resurrection occurred. The people who were alive at that time saw Jesus die on the cross. They know he was dead, he was buried, and he rose again. And over 500 people saw him, including the disciples, when he came back to life, when he resurrected. And he walked around the earth for 40 days before he ascended to heaven. And when the gospel writers wrote the gospels, and they wrote early, there were people that were still alive at that time that saw Jesus. And they could have come to the gospel writers and said, hey, this isn't true what you're writing about. It didn't happen that way. I was there. But nobody ever did that. Nobody ever refuted what the gospel writers said. And these gospel writers died as martyrs. Every single one died as a martyr except for John. Peter was crucified upside down. Now I ask you, who do you know who goes to their death for what they know is a lie? What's the difference between these guys and the terrorists? Well, the terrorists think they know what's true, but they were not eyewitnesses. These guys, the disciples, walked with Jesus. They lived with Jesus. They walked with him. They talked with him. They ate with him. They learned from him. They were eyewitnesses. They saw him. Two of them saw him at the transfiguration. They saw him come to life. They were eyewitnesses. And that's the difference. These guys went to their death and they never recanted their stories. Nobody dies for what they know is a lie. That's one reason why I'm a Christian. The other reason is because of this. All other religions are works-based religions. You have to do something to earn your way to heaven. All other religions say do. You have to pray 5 times a day. You have to pray facing a certain direction. You have to go through certain sacraments to be saved. You have to go on a mission trip. There's all these different things. You have to go to Mecca. You have all these different things that these other religions say you have to do to be saved. They all say do. Christianity says done. It's done. When Jesus died on the cross, the last thing he said was, it is finished. That means paid in full. Your sins have been paid in full. There is nothing we have to do to be with Jesus in heaven. We are saved by grace through our faith. Ephesians 2:8. Christianity is a grace-based salvation. It's something we can't earn. There's not a darn thing you can do to be saved. And that's the difference. It's a free gift. And that's the other reason why I'm a Christian. So all these religions can't be right, but it doesn't mean that one can't be right. And I believe that Christianity is true because Christianity best explains the way things really are in the world today. It's the best explanation. Now, one's own sense of subjective confidence that they're right about their religion isn't good enough. You can say you have an unshakable faith, but if what you believe in is false, then what you have is an unshakable delusion. One has to have more than just feelings. It has to be more than feelings or good psychological confidence. You have to have good reason to believe that your confidence is well justified. If different people believe different things about God and they can't all be right, then they're not being faithful to God, even though they think they are. Faith has to be more than about feelings. It should be about what is reasonable to believe based on what we know to be true. Because your head informs your heart. You can't choose a religion based on feelings. Mormons say, I have a burning in my bosom. Other people say they had a feeling. But if Christians say they have a feeling, then what separates Christianity from everything else? Well, I'll tell you, it's a facts-based religion. It's testable. There's evidence for Christianity. So relativism doesn't make sense in religion or in any everyday practical living way. So what is the sum of all these consequences? What would our world look like if relativism were really true? Well, there would be no right or wrong. There'd be nothing good or evil, no blame or praise, no fairness or injustice, no meaningful moral discussion, and no rule requiring tolerance. Moral relativism creates the kind of world in which the relativist's feet are not firmly planted on the ground, but planted in mid-air. So here's the bottom line. Here's the bottom line. The most important overarching issue in considering an objective or relativistic worldview is all about one thing. It's about authority. From where do you get your authority? A secular person is not committed to the authority of any religion in their own life, but being secular doesn't mean you don't have an authority. It means you're the authority. And for that person, relativism will suit them just fine because they can change the rules as they go along. Who wouldn't want that? Even though, as we've shown, relativism is self-refuting and it doesn't work in the real world. But for Christians, we look to God as our authority in his view of reality. And we see the need for and the rightness of objective standards. You know, as humans, we do more with the world than just try to survive in it. Our perception of God, morality, humanity, and history shape how we live. It shapes how we live, and it's going to shape the decisions we make, how we treat people, and where we go in eternity. There is such a thing as truth. It's written on our hearts, and we know it. In Romans 12:2, Jesus calls Christians not to be conformed to this world, but to be transformed by the renewing of their mind. Christ has saved us from sin to righteousness. We need to grasp the fact that we were saved for something. We were saved for a reason. We have a responsibility now to know the truth and speak it to others. In fact, our salvation employs us in God's redemptive plan for the world. You can't love others by ignoring the cultural evils that victimize them. That's not love. That is not love. So this should motivate us to have a heart for those who believe the lies of our culture that say morality is subjective. And what does this look like? How do we do this? How do we love others who have bought into these bad ideas? Well, the first thing we have to do is inoculate ourselves. And how do we do that? Well, first we have to know what's true, or we're not going to recognize falsehoods when they come. So that means you have to be in the Word. You have to know who Christ is. You have to know his will, his character. You have to recognize his voice. What's true, or like I said, you won't recognize falsehoods. And so because of that, that's not enough. We also have to know about the lies that stand against the truth. And one of the ways we can do that is by reading. And these are two books that are really good topics on this choice. One is Relativism, Feet Firmly Planted in Midair by Greg Koukl and Frank Beckwith. The other one is True for You, But Not for Me by Paul Copan. Those are two really good books on this topic. Now, if you're not a reader, I get it. You can listen to audiobooks. There's great podcasts I can recommend to you. If you ask me when I'm done with this talk, I can recommend some really good apologetics podcasts that are good for you to listen to. Now, another thing you can do is you can, oh, this is going to sound weird, but find an atheist Facebook page. You will learn real quick about the lies that stand against the truth when you go to an atheist Facebook page. You will see what their questions are, what their objections are, how other people respond to them, and how they come back, how they respond to that response. It's an eye opener. You will learn a lot just by doing that. This is one of my favorite YouTube channels. This is my friend Tim Barnett, and he is, I don't know if you're familiar with Stand to Reason. Stand to Reason is a Christian apologetics organization. Greg Koukl, who wrote that book, Relativism, is the head of it. He is a national speaker, and he has other national speakers that speak around the country for him. He has a radio show. He's an author, brilliant apologist, and a podcast that I listen to. So Tim works for him, and Tim used to be a high school science teacher. And when he was a science teacher, he used to grade papers with a red pen. And he not only told the student that they were wrong, but he told them why they were wrong, because he wanted them to learn. So Tim started seeing posts on social media, on Twitter and Facebook and memes, different things from people who were outside of Christianity, and they were mischaracterizing Christianity. And they had no idea what they're talking about. He saw logical fallacies. And so he thought, hey, what if I take the red pen to this? And red pen logic was born. So what Tim does is he has this YouTube channel, and he does these videos that are 5 to 6 minutes long. And he, you can see on the screen there's different things that he talks about, and he packs a lot of information in those 5 to 6 minutes. He's brilliant. You'll learn a lot, and he combats bad logic with good logic, and he's pretty funny in the process. He's a funny guy. So I think you'll really enjoy Red Pen Logic. If you go to that, you will learn a lot. It's a really good YouTube channel. Now, another thing you could do is what you're doing right now. You're at a Ratio Christi meeting. You're learning apologetics. Another thing I would suggest is go to an apologetics conference. There's some brilliant apologists out there who have a lot of information that are very helpful. Now, the last thing I'm going to mention, shameless plug for Biola here. I graduated from Biola University with my master's in apologetics. So I'm going to tell you to get an apologetics degree at Biola University. Now, I know you're a student at a university right now, so keep that in mind. Finish college, get your undergrad, so you can go on and get a master's in apologetics later. They do everything online now. And if obviously everybody doesn't have time to get a master's in apologetics, but they do have an apologetics certificate you can get. And what they do is they send you DVDs, and that's really worthwhile. I actually did that as one of my electives when I was in the master's program. They send you DVDs by these brilliant, well-known apologists, and you still learn a lot. You listen to the DVDs, you take notes, you answer questions, write a 2-page paper, easy peasy, and you got a certificate. But it's great. It's a really good program. So the next thing you need to do is be prepared to respond to bad ideas. I think it's crucial to know how to engage in a meaningful dialogue with a skeptic or someone from another religious viewpoint. We have to engage the culture rather than withdraw from it, because when the church stops living in the culture, we're just not going to have an impact on it. Now, here's another book that I want to recommend. It's not on my slides, so I'm going to hold it up. This is called Tactics. It's also by Greg Koukl. He just happens to be my hero. So this is a book that he wrote 11 years ago. And last year on the 10th anniversary, he did an updated version of it. So this is the updated version, and he made changes to it to suit the culture the way it is now. But basically what he does in this book is he recounts conversations that he's had with people over the years. And if you've ever been in a situation, who hasn't, where we're talking to somebody and you said, oh gosh, I wish I knew what to say to that person. They said this, I should have said that. This is the book for you. This is the book. If you have nothing else in your apologetics library, put this book in your library. He recounts conversations he's had with people. He talks about how he started the conversation, how he asked questions and he gets the conversation going, or maybe how somebody else came out with an objection to him and how he overcame that objection and why he used the tactic that he did, how to draw information out of people, how to get out of the hot seat, how to overcome a steamroller. This is an amazing book, and you will learn a lot from this book if you want to learn how to talk to other people and how to draw information out and stay control of the conversation. That's always good to know. So what I want to do right now is give you some ideas. I want to teach you how to respond to some of these common objections that we hear, and some of these are mentioned in these books. And one of them that we hear a lot is when somebody says there is no truth. Well, when somebody says there is no truth, if you apply that claim to itself, what would you say? Well, you should say, is that true then? Because that's a self-refuted claim, isn't it? If somebody says there's no truth, there is no truth, then what is that? That's a truth claim, right? So if that's a truth claim, and if that's true, then how do we know we should believe that? So you could say, well, is that true then? Why should I believe that? It's self-refuting. It doesn't live up to its own standard. Here's another one. If someone says, there's no truth in anything but science, well, you can say, well, can you prove the truth of that claim in a scientific lab? You see, that claim comes from someone who adheres to the ideology of scientism. And scientism says that there's no way we can know anything. We can't know truth unless it can be empirically verified in a lab. Unless you can look at it under a microscope or a Bunsen burner or test it somehow in a lab, you can't know truth. Hogwash. There are plenty of things that we know are true that science can tell us nothing about. So what's wrong with this claim, first of all, is it's not a scientific claim. If somebody says there's no truth in anything but science, that's a philosophical claim. That is not a scientific claim. So if somebody says that to you, you could say, well, can you prove the truth of that claim in a scientific lab? So JP Moreland did this to somebody. He went to a party and there was some guy that was a scientist, and he was just talking JP's ear off about how you can't know anything, blah, blah, blah. And he went on for probably 5 minutes, and JP just let him talk. And finally, JP stopped him and he says, you know what? So far, I've been listening to you for the last few minutes, and you haven't said one thing that can be proven in a scientific lab. All of your comments have been philosophical comments. And the guy just looked at JP and he was shocked. He didn't know what to say. The guy was speechless. He'd never realized what he was doing before. So I think when you listen to people make claims, listen to what they're saying. Most of the time it's self-refuting. Now this one is the granddaddy of them all. Who are you to judge? Well, if somebody says this, I think you guys are catching on to the self-refuting idea right now. What's wrong with that? It's a judgment, right? Because if they're saying, who are you to judge? What they're really saying is you shouldn't judge, right? That's a judgment. So how would you respond to this? Well, you could say, well, then why are you judging me? And sometimes people might say, well, didn't Jesus say not to judge? Well, guess what? He didn't. People misinterpret Matthew 7 all the time. Jesus never said not to judge. In Matthew 7, he's telling us how to judge. He says, get the plank out of your own eye and then go help your friend. He's telling us he doesn't want us to be hypocritical in our judgment. Don't go tell your friend what they should be doing if you're doing it too. So he's saying, get the plank out of your own eye. He does not want us to be hypocritical in judgment. That's about hypocrisy. So he's not telling us not to judge. He's telling us how to judge. In John 7:24, he says, stop judging by mere appearances, but instead judge correctly. So here again, he's not telling us not to judge. He's concerned with accuracy. He says, judge correctly. So when people say, who are you to judge? Well, you can either say what I said in the beginning. And you could say to them, well, then why are you judging me? Or you could explain to them what I just said about Matthew 7 and how people misinterpret it. Or you could say something like this. You could say, well, I'm a rational thinking human being who's aware of certain fundamental principles of logic and moral reasoning. I think I'm qualified. That'd probably knock their socks off if you said that. But the point is, we have to think about what they're saying. We have to ask questions. And I think it's really, really important to get educated on how to respond to people, because on a college campus, you students are getting hammered. You are getting hammered by atheist professors and other atheist students who say things that are logical fallacies all the time. So I think it's important to know how to respond to those things and equip yourself. The next thing is, the next thing we need to do is invest in others. Just as you would treat someone with care who had been attacked by a virus, you can help somebody who's been attacked by bad ideas by dialoguing with them and love and encourage them and administer truth in doses that they can handle. My husband and I were in Jackson Hole, Wyoming last summer, and when we came off of a hike, we ran into a sandwich shop. We were starving, and we got a sandwich, and we're sitting at a picnic table outside, and out the door comes this young man who worked in the sandwich shop, and he was on his break. So he sits with us, and we strike up a conversation with him. And we said, hey, so are you a student? He says, yeah, I'm at BYU. Okay, so now we know he's Mormon, okay? And then we went on to converse with him, and he ended up telling us that he wasn't going to go on a mission because he didn't think it was necessary. So now we know two things about him. He's Mormon, and he's not really taking his religion seriously. He's not all in, okay? So anyway, we struck up this conversation, and we started talking about salvation and works, because Mormonism is a works-based religion, very much so. And I had the opportunity to share a couple of thoughts with him. And at one point I said something to him, and he looked at me and he goes, wow, that's a good point. So I didn't hit him over the head. I just left a rock in his shoe. That's all you want to do, is give people something to think about. Leave a rock in their shoe. Let them walk away thinking about what you said. Okay. That's what you want to do. You want to give people truth in doses that they can handle. And the last thing we want to do is remember 1 Peter 3:15. This is the apologetics verse. Sanctify Christ as Lord in your hearts. Always be ready to make a defense to everyone who asks you for the hope that is in you, and do it with gentleness and respect. And the last thing I want to show you is my website page. This is the top page. I took this photo a while ago. But with that, I can open up the floor for any questions that pertain to this talk. And I say pertain to this talk because I gave this talk 5 years ago in Providence, Rhode Island. And when I was finished, this young girl was probably 19, 20 years old, sitting in the audience. And she raises her hand and she goes, what do you think about weed? Anyway, I told her what I thought, but anyway, so for the sake of time, let's try and stay on topic. We're pretty close to an hour here. Anybody have any questions?
All right. Well, first of all, Claudia, thank you so much for bringing us the truth tonight. Let's give Claudia a round of applause.
Thank you.
And some Q&A time. Let me start off with a question, and then you guys gather your questions. And Abby, you can open your mic if you have a question. The first question I have is, responding to somebody, what would you recommend somebody who says that morality is defined by society, right? So each society or each community,
a social contract. Social
contract. Yeah. How do you respond to that and get around?
Well, the problem with that is when you have a culture where morality is defined by a social contract, that means there's no transcendent standard of truth or morality. Okay. That means morality is whatever everybody thinks it is. It's the mob mentality. Whatever the mob thinks is right is right. And the danger in that is what happens when they change their mind. So what happens is what you end up with is chaos and confusion, and the person with the loudest microphone or the most power wins. And that's what we're seeing right now. That's what we're seeing with Disney. There's a few people, a small minority at Disney that have the loudest microphone, and that's what we're seeing. So that's why truth and morality has to be transcendent. It can't be a man-made thing. Because if humans are the arbiter of truth, then humans can change their mind. And that's a dangerous thing. It has to be a transcendent standard. It has to be something that everybody knows and everybody understands. And like I said, you know what? Morality is written on our hearts. Everybody knows what's right and wrong. But we live in a post-truth culture right now where people know that truth exists, but they don't care because they want to do what they want to do. They want to do with what lines up with whatever their desires are. So I hope that answers your question. Does it answer?
Yeah, it sounds like it would be arbitrary then.
Yeah.
It could change over time.
Right.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Let me go, Daniel. You got a question?
Yeah. I just want to hear what you think. Do you think that like culture nowadays, because it's getting real bad, it's trash. Do you think people will start seeing the objective truth of things down the line, or no?
You know what, it was hard for me to hear you. You said, do I think people will start doing what? Say that again. I'm sorry.
Seeing the objective truth of things rather than just this subjective wave that's happening right now.
You know, I think people do see objective truth, but they choose to ignore it.
Yeah.
People know what objective truth is, but it's like what I said before. It comes down to authority. Somebody who does not look to God for their answers as the arbiter of truth or morality, they want to be the authority. It's about authority. And so there's always going to be people who want to look at themselves as the authority because they just don't want to change their lifestyle. They want to do what they want to do. So I think we're always going to see both, to be honest.
Yeah. It reminds me of another question, and that is regarding a soon-to-be Supreme Court judge.
Yes.
Who was unwilling.
Right.
Even though she used the term woman about 10 times in her opening. Unwilling.
Yeah.
But why was she unwilling? What's your take on that? Why was
Okay,
she
here's my take. First of all, let me say one thing about that. I thought that was funny because after she said she couldn't define a woman, then she went on to say that she's a woman. And I'm thinking, okay, if you can't define a woman, how do you know you're a woman? I mean, that was self-refuting right there. I mean, that's the kind of logic that, you know, we hear all the time. And the second part of your question was, why do I think she said that?
Yeah.
I think that people are under, and it's not necessary, but I think people are weak and people are under immense pressure to please the crowd. And I think it comes down to pressure and who you want to please.
Yeah.
And, you know, I had a phone conversation with Greg Kokel once. He was talking to me about something. I don't, but he brought up this point to me. And I thought, this is an awesome point. He says in Mark 15:15, Jesus is on trial with Pilate. And Pilate, and it says, you know, the crowd wanted Pilate to release Barabbas instead of Jesus. And it said, the passage says, wishing to please the crowd, Pilate had Jesus flogged. And so what happens when you wish to please the crowd? You crucify Jesus. And that's what people are doing. They are wishing to please the crowd. I think it's about personal acceptance. They don't want to be seen as someone who is not tolerant. They want to be accepted. I think it's about acceptance.
Yeah.
And that's my take. Because it depends. It all comes down to who do you want to please? Do you want to please the crowd or do you want to please God?
Yeah, that makes sense.
People have to make that choice.
That makes sense. Let me ask Rebecca and Danny if you guys have a question, and then Abby, I'll come to you next. So get ready on Zoom. Do you guys have any questions or comments?
I have one question. I know the popular definition of subjective truth is opinion. Like my opinion is that,
Right. Right.
Strawberry ice cream is better than chocolate.
Sure.
But I wonder if there is a little bit of danger in saying there are two kinds of truths, objective and subjective, because the world will automatically say, oh, well, religion is subjective, and not objective.
Yeah.
It seems to me that something is either true or it is not true. I like strawberry ice cream. That is true.
Right.
Strawberry ice cream is the best in the whole world. That's an opinion.
Right.
It's not necessarily, it seems to me that subjective truth is something that actually depends on the person saying it. So if I say this is strawberry ice cream, and it is strawberry ice cream, but Daniel says, oh, that's chocolate ice cream, and it suddenly became chocolate ice cream.
Yeah.
That would be subjective truth because it would depend on the person saying it, which obviously is not something that would happen.
Yeah. So, I mean, there really can't, I don't think we can really say there's one kind of truth because there's not. I mean, there's just not. There's two kinds of truth. It's objectively true that there's two kinds of truth. Okay.
Okay, I would love to hear you explain that more because I would disagree with that. I would tend to think something is true or it's false.
Well, so listen, objective truth can be true or false, and subjective truth can be true or false. Okay. But it's important for people to distinguish that there are two different kinds of truth, because if they can't distinguish the two kinds of truth, then they're not going to see that objective truths are objective no matter what they think about it. That's the thing about objective truth. It doesn't depend on your opinion. It doesn't matter if you like it, if you agree or you disagree. It's just true. So if people don't understand that, then you can't show them that objective truths are just true, whether one likes it or not. And it is, I don't know if you follow me, but I think it's important to let people see the difference there.
Yeah, probably the key word in the subjective truth is it's the subject
Yeah.
who is making the claim.
Right.
And it certainly could be true.
Yeah.
But I get Rebecca's point though, that it would be easy to cast religion or Christianity in the subjective truth category and just kind of wash their hands of it.
I think the reason why people do that is because people don't know what the differences are. Most people don't know what the differences are between religions. So it's just easier to say, oh, it doesn't matter. They're all the same, because people don't really know that they're different. So it's easier to just put it in the subjective category than doing your homework and figuring out that there is a difference. So that's, I think that's one reason why people say that. And the other reason is because people like to go down the religious buffet and take a little from here and a little from there and a little from here. Well, and what you end up with is syncretism. It's not true religion. And that's the kind of thing that God judges people for. So, so I think that, I think it's important for people to understand. Oh, and here's the other point I was going to make. People say it's a free country and we can believe in anything we want. Yes, of course you can. Of course we can. But it doesn't mean that everything you believe is true. The only thing that matters is what is what you believe true, especially when it comes to eternity.
Mhm.
So I think it's important for people to do their homework and look into some of these religions that they've traditionally been raised in, and figure out why they believe that. Why am I this religion?
Mhm.
Okay, I was born into this family, but why? Why is this important? Look into it. I think it's easy to just not do it and say, oh, all religions are the same.
Mhm.
That's the easy way out.
Yeah. All right.
So,
Yeah, sounds good. Let me go to Abby. Do you have a question? If so, just open up your microphone and go for it. There you go.
I don't really have a question, but I really appreciated like how to respond to those that claim relativism that's helpful on a college campus like UNT.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of
Yeah,
self-defeating statements out there for sure.
Yeah, there's a lot. And this is why I'm on the board for Ratio Christi, because I really believe that it's needed on college campuses. Kids are brought up in, and thank you for saying that, Abby. I appreciate you saying that. Kids are brought up in Sunday school and they go to Christian school, and by the time they get to college, they've been sheltered, and now they're at a public university, and people are coming up to you saying things like the things I said earlier. There's no truth in anything but science, or there is no truth. You can't know truth. Professors say that to the students. 65% of professors are atheists. And so suddenly all these Bible stories that you heard when you were a kid about Noah and the ark and Jonah and the great fish don't cut it on the college campus. Students have no idea how to respond to these claims that other people are making. And the next thing you know, they go home after their first or second semester on a college campus and they say, Mom and Dad, I don't believe in God anymore. I don't know if you guys know this, but 70 to 80% of students between the ages of 18 and 24 will disengage from the church after they graduate from high school, because they go on to these college campuses and they've had their freedom for the first time in their life. There's nobody there making them go to church. They're not in a Christian school anymore. They've got their freedom. Mom and dad aren't there. And they're just getting their world rocked. People are saying things, they have no idea how to respond. I mean, I didn't when I went to Cal State Fullerton here in California. And I wasn't a born again Christian then, so people didn't really bother me. But now these kids, it's a fight for survival. So I think Ratio Christi is the greatest thing, because it equips students to know how to respond. And in fact, there's a section in tactics that talks about how to respond to a professor that puts you on the spot in the classroom. And I think that's well worth reading right there. So there's things you can say to a professor that are respectful, but you're making your point and you're getting yourself out of the hot seat. Professors have the microphone and they like to put students in the hot seat, and he tells you how to get out of it and put the professor back in the hot seat. So yeah,
without hurting your grade too. So that's
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right. I think Joseph had to step out, but
Okay.
Claudia, in respect of your time, I think we'll close it off tonight. We always close with a prayer, and I'll ask Daniel to do that for us if you'll come up.
Thank you. Okay.
All right, Lord Jesus, thank you for bringing us together. Thank you, Claudia, for bringing this message to us in order that we could see your objective truth in this world.
and we can spread it to others to make them see the reality that you created. Let us just be safe amongst this nation and just spread your word. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Amen. All
Thank you
right.
guys so much. I
Thanks,
appreciate the
Claudia.
opportunity.
Appreciate it. Have a nice night.
Yes,
Thanks
you too.
again.
Thank you.
All right. God bless. Bye-bye.
Take care, you too. Bye.